Say when.
I don't think we've gone live yet. Ashley hasn't popped back over.
Nope, just 1 second. All right, folks, you're live on YouTube and not public input, but I'm going to go ahead and work on that. So you can go ahead and start your meeting.
Good day, everyone, and welcome. I, Orlene Simmons, co-chair of the Joint Vance Monument Task Force, calls the September 3rd, 2020 meeting to order. Co-chair Annette Mosley will also be presiding today. Please respond to the roll call. And if I mispronounce your name, please correct me. Antoinette Mosley.
Here.
Deborah Miles. Deborah Miles. I'll come back. Bernard Oliphant.
Present.
Savannah Gibson. Savannah Gibson. Shirley Whitesides.
I'm here. I think I was
Present.
muted.
Shirley Whitesides, present.
Lawrence Gillum. Lawrence Gillum. I will call him back. David R. King.
Here. Present.
Carmen Ramos Kennedy.
That's Carmen Ramos Kennedy. Thank you. I'm present.
Thank you. Essie Hutchison. Catherine Calhoun Cutshaw.
Hi, good evening.
Elizabeth Harper.
Present.
Ben Scales.
Here.
Dennis Fagman Jr.
Here.
Andrea Olson.
Here.
And I'll circle back round for Deborah Miles. I think I saw her earlier.
Here.
Thank you. Thank you. We will follow the agenda as outlined. I would like to introduce our facilitator, Cortina Caldwell. She will tell us a little about herself and then introduce others who are present at this meeting. Welcome, Cortina.
Thank you, Ms. Orlean. Thank you all. I want to express first gratitude for my ancestors and acknowledge the elders on this call listening in our community. I want to show honor to the land and also give thanks for being here on this journey with y'all. It wouldn't be right if I didn't do that and say those things. I want to first start, although we're all kind of in the welcome and introduction section of our agenda, I do want to start with a group check-in question that I want to go ahead and name, and I wonder if Nia can support by having that in the chat box as well. I'm also happy to type. But I want to go ahead and give you the check-in question now so that I can offer just a minute or two for those of us that are introverts on the call in the meeting that might need a second to reflect. And then go into check-in questions, and I'll place myself last and share a little bit about myself with you all in that question as well, and move us into the next few parts of our agenda that way. So the check-in question is: 1 year from now, to your kids, grandkids, mentees, any young person that you're working with, what story do you want to be able to tell about what happened here? Whether in this committee, in our recommendations, or beyond. And I think that will set us up for the conversation and the meeting today, as we have said on the agenda. So I'll repeat that check-in question one more time. 1 year from now, to your kids, grandkids, mentees, or any students that you work with, what story do you want to be able to tell about what happened here? This committee, or the recommendations, otherwise. So I'm just going to time us for just 1 quick minute. If you need to reflect or write down some notes, it'd be great for us to hear from each other on this question. And I am keeping time, so I'll let you know when the minute's up. About 10 seconds left. Wrap up any thought, you might be ready. Okay, so I'm basically gonna keep to the order of the agenda and kind of just call folks and then let people know who is up next. And then as we go along, I'll try to switch that up so that the same people aren't always having to go first. But for today's purpose, I want to call in Antoinette, if you don't mind sharing on the check-in question, and then you'll be followed by Deborah Miles.
Okay, sure. Wasn't quite finished, but essentially, my hope is that a year from now, I'll be able to tell my godchildren that we were able to work together as neighbors collaboratively to begin a process of righting historical wrongs. And I'll be able to use this as a concrete example of what can happen in community when regular folks get together and work through issues.
Helpful, thank you. How about Deb? Hi, Deb Miles. Can Deb up next?
I would like to tell the youth of our community that we safely transformed Pack Square to tell a story. The young people will know more about our pluralistic democracy in our mountain home.
Thank you. So next up, we'll have Bernard, followed by Savannah.
I would be honored to address the issues with anyone I talk to, especially the children, and be able to personally reflect to them the experiences that we shared through this time. I would like to be able to tell them about that we honestly addressed some of the ugly periods of our history, and we brought everything to the table and we met on the level. We left our personal biases and agendas to be set aside as we went to a level of understanding that we all could appreciate and look back on with a smile and with honesty.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Whew, powerful. Savannah, you ready?
Hi. I want people to remember that we all work together to make a decision that makes people within Asheville that feel like they've been excluded for a long time feel more included within the community, and like their contributions to Asheville history matter just as much as other folks.
Thank you. So the next up we'll have Ms. Orlean, followed by Ms. Shirley, and then Lawrence. Ms. Orlean, you're muted if you're talking. Oh, you're muted. Yeah. I wonder. There we go.
Okay.
Now we can hear you.
I would like to be able to tell my grandchildren and great-grandchildren the story of a community here in Western North Carolina in the year of 2020, where the city council and the county commissioners saw fit to appoint an awesome group of people to sit together and decide the fate of an area where at one time there was a market where slaves were sold. There was also signs that said quite ugly at the restrooms and at the water fountain, and that this group of people were able to make a change where a monument once stood that honored just a former governor, but now it reflects our community, starting with the first inheritors of this land, the Native Americans, and also recognizes African Americans at this time.
Thank you so much.
I would like to tell my grandchildren and all the children in the Asheville Buncombe communities how a group of people came together to make a life-changing event to represent the total Buncombe County that reflects all cultures and respects for each other. And I hope in telling them that we'll be able to show them so they will be able to carry the same narrative to the next generation and tell their kids that Asheville City and Buncombe County create a great impact in Buncombe County that promotes love, peace, and justice for all.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Shirley. I noticed that Lawrence had hopped off. I don't know if you're back on and able to go up. Let's see. No, I don't think Lawrence made it back on yet.
I'm back on.
Oh, you are? Perfect.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, for me, not just my grandchildren, but all the ancestors that come long after we are gone, that a group of people voluntarily took the nerve and the guts and the desire to do something constructive and build a monument that is everlasting, not made out of stone or any other material, within the heart. And there's a story of history and his story. And I hope that history will define exactly what took place during this most difficult time, and especially with all the divisiveness that we have in this world today.
So next up, if we can have David King, followed by Ms. Carmen Ramos Kennedy.
Okay. I would like to be able to say in the future that in 2020, this community came together to create a future that reflected on the contributions and the history of all of the peoples who helped make this community. And that none of those are forgotten or left out, and none of the history is forgotten or left out, good or bad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Carmen, you're muted. It gets tricky. I think you're still muted. Ms. Carmen, if you can hear me, yeah, you're still muted. So maybe if you want to just hover over that bottom bar. Okay, we'll come back to you. We'll come back and maybe we can see if there's a manual feature we can use. So we'll come back to Ms. Carmen, Catherine, and then Elizabeth, if y'all are ready to go up.
Sure, thank you. I want to be able to tell the young people in my life a year from now and 20 years from now and 50 years from now that an extraordinarily diverse group of citizens, and when I say diverse, I mean in so many ways, in our age, in our occupation, in our talents, in our race, came together to have honest and open conversations about what our public history infrastructure says to and about our community, and to make a real true effort to build something that represents as many people as possible, and ultimately the folks who built this community and who originally settled this land, who occupied this land. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that kind of conversation, that this group accomplished something that is in so many ways cityscape changing, life changing, history changing.
Awesome, thank you so much. Ms. Carmen, we got you on. You want to go ahead and go?
I don't know what happened. It was not, it was open and you couldn't hear me. So what I'd like to say is that in this very troubled time that we're living in right now, a group of Asheville and Buncombe County citizens came together and hashed out their differences. And I hope that it will be concluded by the time a year from now comes, and that we will be sharing a narrative that is more inclusive of the entire history of Asheville. And I would warn them that that is only the first step, because the narrative that we have now is long and deep and wide, and we need to correct that across the city, the county, the state, and the nation.
Beautiful. Thank you. And then Elizabeth, you're ready to go up?
Yeah. I think one of the things that I want to be able to tell those that come after us and to be remembered for as part of this group is that we took, what was seen as, a nice city park, but we recognized it as a site of oppression, and we're really honest about that. But turned it into something beautiful and more representative of the community. But I also, and then I also hope this is remembered for the city of Asheville setting a precedent for listening to and elevating voices in our community and also taking decisive action. We've got the starts of some task force, but I think we really need to see some follow through. And I hope that's something that we can tell folks that this was really a part of that.
Thank you. So I know Essie's not present with us. So if we can go to Ben and then Dennis and then Andrea, please correct me if I mispronounced that. You'll finish this out. So Ben.
Sorry about that. I really like this question. I'll start off by saying that. I think we should ask ourselves this question with just about everything we do. If you're going to be talking to somebody a year from now, 5 years from now, if you're going to have somebody that you want to have a good impression of you, what story do you want to be able to tell them? And I do it all the time. It helps me center myself and thank you for asking us this question. So this is what I came up with. 1 year from now, I want to be able to tell my kids about how I listened, about how I spoke up when I heard something I thought that needed to be responded to, and about how I kept my mouth shut when I realized it was better to do so. I want to talk about how I was a part of this diverse team who re-examined history from a different perspective based on a different lived experience than I have or that my kids will have. And as a part of that re-examination, as a result of that re-examination, we made history ourselves.
Okay.
Well, Ben, you made that pretty hard to follow. That was well said. First, I think anything that I'd like to tell my kids or anybody is that I acted with integrity, and that we maintained that first and foremost. But I definitely enjoy the idea that we came together, working together as a diverse community to tackle what's going to be an emotional issue for some. And we did that with compassion, consideration to our history, all the while basing that on fact and perspective. So I'm excited. This, like Ben said, I think this was a great question.
Thank you, Dennis. And Andrea, am I pronouncing that right by saying Andrea?
It's Andrea, but at this point, I don't mind.
Andrea. Okay.
Thank you for asking. I have 5 children, and next year I would love to tell them that and I'd also like to tell the children I'm volunteering to homeschool in my home during this time of other backgrounds, that we gathered together, discussed and met for 12 weeks to ensure that each and every one of them see part of themselves in this space, that physical space in Asheville when they walk by, that none of them felt excluded or tread upon today because of what we did last year. And that we thought about each of you children as we took steps to right wrongs, the Cherokee, the Caucasian, the African, the Asian, the Hispanic. And, we have a partial Cherokee background. The people who originally had and inhabited this land and cared for it, they call upon the 4 directions. We don't know about them. It's red, yellow, white, and black. And that's supposed to be representative of all the skin colors. And what connects us in the center of that medicine wheel is the heart, and above the heavens and the earth below. And that connects all people as one. And that when we tell them next year what we accomplished, that they all feel love and that they belong on this circle and this wheel of life.
Sure. So, last to go. And I'm really grateful, Andrea, for you going right before me and for bringing in and calling in our Native Indigenous elders. For me, as somebody who walks really closely with and feels really closely tied to my history, at a very young age, I was curious about where I came from and what our family roots were, and pretty quickly came to understand and to know about the story of my great-great-grandmother, who is or was a Eastern band of the Cherokee Indian and Black, and who found her freedom in Rutherford County. And when I think about my why in being here, as well as the why for my work toward equity and justice and inclusive history, I think about her. I think about her story. And I think about the fact that part of my journey is to really get to a place to where I know her name and I know more of her story and I know more of my family's story that has been largely untold. And I have about 7 generations that I know of that are from Western North Carolina. We have roots. I was born and raised in Burke County, Morganton, North Carolina. And we have family roots in Burke County and Buncombe County, Rutherford, Caldwell, you name it. We have people from there. And for me, this journey and this work reminds me of a similar call of a homecoming that I felt in 2011 when I moved to Asheville and moved back home. And I felt this call that there was work to do in community. And I also knew that I had entrepreneurial ambitions. Part of my background, in addition to being a facilitator, is working across different sectors in community, whether it's entrepreneurship in business or the arts, or those working around social justice and organizing, and seeing these common threads and really always trying to do my best to work at the middle. And just to kind of go into a little bit about my facilitation style and my story as well. Being on this kind of journey or quest to understand my lineage and my history and my place in what was happening next, where I called home, I discovered creative facilitation as a practice and as a tool. And I really deeply believe in facilitation as a community process because I believe it is what allows us to be in a space together and invite all those different voices in the room and allow people to be heard and different perspectives to come in. Creative facilitation in particular also is about embodiment and how are we embodying what the work is that we're moving toward. And being curious and courageous at times enough to challenge what we think we know, and analyze what we don't know, and be willing to reimagine the things that might be calling for change. And in creative facilitation, one of our core beliefs is also that we see transformation as a way of life. And for me, I think about my Indigenous ancestors and my Black ancestors and how responsive and flexible they have had to be and resilient they have had to be in navigating all the different barriers and challenges in society, but also how creative and mindful and very community oriented they were and became in that work and in that process. And so that's really what brings me here. And that's what I hold true as far as facilitation and the style of it. I will say that being online during COVID, that the facilitation might look different than it had if we were in person. But I'm committed to helping to guide this process with you all, alongside the leadership of the co-chairs. And to do my part in this journey, and just to be open to the responsiveness and the creativity that I need to have along the way to do that. I think that's about what I want to say in response. And so I think for me, just to bring that back around full circle, the story that I want to be able to tell is that I did my part to honor my family and my ancestors, and that this community came together at a time where there was a lot of challenge and really turned our trauma into triumph, and that we really created a model that was healing and that other cities and communities can use as well. So I'm going to move us into, and thank you all for sharing all of your stories. I think we're also, in sharing in detail as we did, we also kind of hit on some of the questions that'll come later. So no worries about time. It's my role to kind of keep us with time and move through all the things. So I will also say that is there will be some flexibility in terms of how long things take, but I will keep my commitment to move us through the agenda.
And Tina?
Yeah.
This is Bernard. Can I add one thought to my comments?
Sure.
And you kind of capsulized it in what you said and what Andrea said. And it's the embodiment of all the voices for this particular moment that is more than a moment. It's actually part of a movement that is perpetuated throughout the new history that is being written.
Writing a new history.
Say that again.
As you were sharing, it just rang out to me. Writing a new history stood out in what you just shared.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, everyone. So let's move us along in the agenda. I again want to thank y'all for your honest and transparent answers, and we'll keep building on the things that we shared within that. So I do want to kind of talk a little bit about group norms for a moment, and then I'll kind of move us into the recap of onboarding and talking about some communication norms. So the first question, I guess, for the group is that, let me back up and say, so when we're talking about group norms, to just name what that means is what are our agreements about how we want to hold the space together so that we can have the kind of conversations that will invite everybody's voices in the room. And then what are those commitments or guiding statements that we want to keep to? I do have a few that were on the onboarding packet that were already part of some of the group roles that I'll just read out. And then I want to invite people to either unmute yourself and you can chime in. We can just do this popcorn style or in the chat box. And I'll read those aloud for people calling in. What some group norms might be about how we want to hold this space together. So some that already have been in the orientation process for the group are come prepared, do your homework is number 1. Number 2, attend meetings with an open mind. Number 3 was vote on all matters unless recused for conflict. And then 4, respect views of other members. What are other agreements that feel important for us to establish at this point in our process? Do people have anything to add to that list? And while y'all are thinking about that, I'll just name a few that have been part of another group process, or the ones that I typically lean on to move through to get the consensus with groups. And then feel free to type these in the chat box or come off mute if you agree with these, and I'm happy to add these to that list. So the next one is participate fully, trust the process. Another one is respond with curiosity or inquiry. Third is speak from the I, so speaking for yourself. And then another one that I have used that works with groups is acknowledging one mic or respect the speaker. So just let's do a round. Trying to see the best way to invite people. Well, let's just do this. We don't need to necessarily do a round. I want to just give another couple of seconds to see if there's anything that people want to add. And since this isn't necessarily something for us to get quorum or consensus on at this moment, I just want to see if people are good with, and we can just use thumbs for this. Are you good with what we have on the list that I read the first time? I have some, or I want to add one of the ones that you mentioned, and just down as I disagree. So I saw most all thumbs up. We're good. Okay, beautiful. And then, yep.
I want to say this just for clarification for me. This is a very serious and important time in our lives. And as we go through this process, I think we have to be respectful of each other. We also have to be very honest with each other and sort of agree right now to disagree and come to some resolve. I think if we do this and it doesn't really get to the core of the matter because we're worried about who's watching us or what we're saying, it's going to be fruitless. And I would hope that all of us will stand up for what we feel, speak up for what we're thinking, and be open-minded to come to a resolve that doesn't necessarily give you the peace of mind or the satisfaction that you wanted.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you so much for bringing those in, Lawrence. So I just want to reflect back first. The two additions that we could add based on Lawrence's suggestion are our commitment to honesty, to speak up. And the second one I heard was address conflict or differing perspectives with curiosity. And just to get does that thermometer from people, does that feel like other good agreements for us to add to this list? Okay.
Can I add something else that I heard?
Yeah, Elizabeth, and then, yep, Dennis, Savannah, and then whoever else is on the phone, if you could just drop your agreement in the chat box, that would be great to include y'all's voice. And go ahead, Elizabeth.
Something that I heard Lawrence say that I think was really important to add to honesty was courage.
Courage. Thank you. All right. And go for it. Who's talking?
Bernard.
Bernard, thank you.
Also, if there's an issue or concern that you disagree with, address the issue and not the person. And respect the person.
Thank you. Any other thoughts before we just do a quick thermometer for our alignment with those other agreements? Any other thoughts from folks on the phone? All right, so I want to read these out loud so that we can move to the next piece. But again, just want to name these and get the agreement to at least present these again. And we can present these on our next agenda. And I'll follow up with the co-chairs about that. But just for right now, here's what we would be drafting. Number 1, come prepared, do your homework. Number 2, attend with an open mind. Number 3, vote on all matters unless recused for conflict. 4, respect views, respect other members. 5, be honest, speak up, and speak up courageously. And then 6, address conflict with curiosity. And then I added, address the issue, not the person. And just a thermometer on that of, do those feel like agreements for us to draft up? We can circle back next meeting about an official vote. Okay, great, thanks y'all. And then I have further discussion if there are some that people have thought about between now and next meeting. And then I do want to ask for people, if anybody's off mute, if you could mute yourself just to make sure that there's no feedback bouncing for people on the phones. I can't quite track that, but that might be helpful. Okay, so then let's move down on into recap orientation or onboarding. So we won't necessarily spend as much time here, but I do want to, and we've kind of talked a little bit about communication norms. So if we do need some more time here, we can take that. But for those here on the call, I believe everybody has a copy of your onboarding booklet from the orientation. So I just wanted to, and we thought it would be good to have a moment in the schedule just to pull out some major highlights and see if there are any questions that people have about that. Not necessarily going back through that in detail because there was a pretty extensive meeting, and then that has been recorded and is available on the YouTube channel for viewing. But just a couple of things to note. On page 4 of this book, it does talk about the posting of the agenda 3 days before. And just a point of clarification that the agenda will be posted 48 hours before. So it would be technically Tuesday by 4:30, with our meetings being Thursday by 4:30, just in case anybody was looking for that on Monday and didn't see that. I just wanted to clarify that that's our understanding. And then also in terms of task force support on page 8, there's some ways that we could have or call in additional support that we might need when we move into setting the timeline and the pace, and even with community engagement. I just wanted to call in that we might be thinking about what these sources of support look like, in addition to all of us here. And if we need anything, other support that we need to name, if we feel like there are any gaps at any point. So just calling that back in. And then the last piece was between pages 2 and 4 of our onboarding handbook, basically goes over what our task at hand is, as well as our timeline and what the composition of the group is. And I did want to, as we go into next talking about conducting business and timeline, a couple of things about our scope just to bring into this conversation today, and just to be reminded of that part of our work involves strategy. So in our expectations, we have a recommendation, we have the recommending removal or repurposing of Vance Monument within legal requirements, but we also have a community engagement plan that is part of our scope that focuses on those harmed and most negatively impacted by Vance Monument. So that's something for us to be thinking about, is the strategy of moving us toward that. Additionally, we have relationship building and inquiry. That's a part of our work. And so specifically are identifying and recommending African Americans to honor the local history of Asheville and Buncombe County. And so naming that, because part of our work and process will be thinking about who are other people for us to call in or to make sure that we're in relationship with in this process. And we'll have time to talk about that in just a little bit. And then the other responsibilities being around our fiscal responsibilities. So making sure that there's budget recommendations for or fiscal implementations of our recommendations. So it's having a process in our timeline and in our journey where we look at that. And then the leadership component, which has actually already happened in the selection of the two co-chairs, with Miss Orlean and Antoinette. We will be meeting weekly not every 12 weeks, once every week for 12 weeks with our 90-day commitment to the county and the city with this process. Technically, we would hit our 90-day mark November the 14th. There is a little bit of wiggle room around our finish line, if you will, but not a lot. So basically 12 weeks from, 12 weeks including today, since this is our first commenced meeting, will take us until November the 19th. And once we get into the timeline, we can talk a little bit more about all these different pieces that I named of our work and our scope, and then kind of piecing this puzzle together with you all around important steps along the way. But again, I don't want to jump ahead, but those are the things that I wanted to pull into this conversation today from the onboarding handbook. Are there any questions or comments or anything that needs clarification about onboarding orientation or any of that before we move forward? Okay. I want you to move forward with phone.
I have a question, please.
Yes, please.
When we talk about the definition of removal, does that include alteration, or is alteration a different subject and issue of the monument?
That's a great question. My understanding is alteration would be repurpose, but I think we can write that as a question and get clarification on. And can we come back to y'all with that answer?
Absolutely.
Cortina, this is Brad. I may be able to assist with that answer. Hello, everyone. Good evening. I would answer that question by saying that removal of the monument is specifically discussed in the statute, and alteration is not specifically discussed. So I would consider those two separate things, with removal having certain legal criteria as precedent in order to do it, but there is no restriction placed on alteration. So I'm using that term alteration. I think that would include repurposing, modifying, anything that would not be actually moving the monument or removing it permanently. I hope that answered your question, sir.
That helps a lot. And I think removal had a time limit on it also, because it meant placing it back in the original structure. And I'm really concerned about alteration and modification. Thank you.
Yeah, and I will just respond to that quickly and say that the statute mentions a timeline if you are relocating it temporarily. In other words, if a monument such as this were going to be moved and then moved back, there is a timeline for doing it. However, there are certain circumstances where it can be removed permanently. And I think in this case, the one that would be applicable is if the monument is determined to be a risk to public safety, which that language was included in the joint resolution by the county commission and the city council. So I do not believe under that particular exception, there is any time frame for bringing it back if removal is effectuated.
Understood. Does that answer your question, Bernard?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And there's another question, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I would like some more clarification on the financial recommendations. Does that mean that we're expected to get kind of professional quotes and estimates, or kind of in our best guess, this would likely be less expensive? Just at what level of detail are we expected to provide?
Thank you. Does anyone currently on the call have that answer, or is that one for us to get clarification on? What's the expectation with the financial recommendations?
Tina, this is David. We don't have a definitive answer to that, but what I do understand from county commission is we do need to be somewhat mindful of the cost of whatever we undertake, but they're very much open. And I think they'd like us to give them variations maybe on what we come up with that they could take a look at and see what they can budget. I just think, we need to be mindful of it when we decide, so that because the more within a reasonable budget we get, the more likely this is to happen right away. And I think that's what we all would like to see.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. That's helpful. Does that answer your question, Elizabeth?
It does. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on the floor while we're on this clarification of scope onboarding orientation? Okay. Alrighty. So that moves us into conducting business with just a little bit of time before we're moving into our next kind of hour, give or take, of our meeting. So just to establish some communication norms. So one of the things as far as communication that's part of this process will be getting consensus. We've also been talking about that in terms of quorum, with this being a committee of voting members. And we have the two co-chairs that'll be doing that process. Anytime we have something to be voted on to get quorum, there will be a process of calling the committee members that are present by name and getting official votes. We haven't really had to exercise that yet, but I imagine by next meeting that will be something that we will be moving into with our group norms and agreements or other aspects of business. Beyond that, I think one of the things here for us to just get some clarification on is how we're going to communicate if there are questions, if people are having even tech issues while there's facilitation happening, and just seeing how people want to communicate. And there are a couple of things that I can recommend and just see if these feel like a good way for us to be in online space, since we're also at the grace of technology. So a couple of things there. So in terms of if there's a question that I'm asking, or at the times when we have speakers or other people that are sharing or presenting, one of the suggestions or ways that we can chime in is using the chat box, which we're all kind of already, we are using the chat box. It would be great to make sure that everybody's voice comes into the room. Even if you are just agreeing with something, or you just want to like ditto something or chime in, it would be great to have some engagement there. The other thing that I can also make sure to always do is if people just want to popcorn and come off mute when there is something that we're deciding or asking feedback for, like we did around onboarding. And then the third thing, which I also already introduced, is to use what we call in facilitation world a thermometer, which the folks on the phone can't see. So I'm always going to invite the people on the phone to please, chime in, let your voice be heard in the chat box if you're on the phone, if you can. If not, because I'm not really sure how it works on your phone. But if not, then obviously would love for y'all to be people that come off mute and chime in. But with the thermometer, basically how I explained it before, this is kind of an easy process for a consensus that we use in facilitation world, and it works online because it's visual. And so basically, again, thumbs up is like, I agree, I give my enthusiastic consent around what's being proposed. If your thumb is sideways, that's basically like, I'm not enthusiastic about my yes, but I'm giving my yes, and I'm not going to block this process or block the decision. And I might have something to say if you wanted me to speak up and chime in. And then thumbs down is basically I'm dissenting from what's being proposed, and I have something to voice, or I have something that I need to say. And so that's a quick, easy process that we can continue to use. And so I just wanted to get y'all's consent about how we move into consent about those things. And how does that feel? Okay, awesome. So I'm seeing thumbs up. For the folks on the phone, you'll have to just verbally always tell us or use the chat box. So I'm looking at Savannah's phone number. I don't know.
Can you hear me?
Yep. What'd you say, Savannah?
I said thumbs up too.
Okay. And then the 855 number, I'm sorry, it's just your phone number showing up. Maybe that's, yeah, never mind. Sorry, that's not one of the folks. So it's just Savannah on the phone for right now.
That's the production phone number.
Got it. Okay. I remembered it being connected to us. Thank you, Ashley. Okay. All right. So we'll keep moving into setting timelines since we are going to hear a report, and our time is probably off a little bit on our agenda, but I'm keeping track of time. So for the next about hour, we're going to move into setting timelines as well as community engagement. We'll have probably more realistically about 45 to 50 minutes so that we do leave that 5 minutes at the end to adjourn, and that we do end right at 6:30 as much as possible. And then prior to that, as you can see on the agenda, we'll also be getting an update from Richard White. So I'll move us into each of these for about 20 minutes or so. And then if we need more time, we can move these on to the next agenda. So as far as setting timelines, just to circle back to that conversation. So today technically counts as our first commenced meeting. And we have an additional 11 minimum meetings until about around the time when we hit our 90-day mark. And if you're like me and you have to write things out, I'm happy to call out these dates. Would that be helpful? Keeping in mind, yeah, so I'll call out the dates. And then just to also name in this meeting that the committee has voted on these being 4:30 to 6:30 Thursdays weekly is what seemed to work for most everybody's needs. We can also, if we move into things and we need to readdress or reshift or be flexible on that, I would think that we can have that conversation too. So for now, these are Thursdays, 4:30 to 6:30. Today, September 3rd, September 10th, September 17th. It's the third meeting. Week 4, September 24th. Week 5, October 1st. Week 6, October 8th. Week 7, October 15th. Week 8, October 22nd. Week 9, October 29th. Week 10, November 5th. Week 11, November 12th. And week 12, November 19th. So we talked a little bit earlier about our task and our scope of work with the committee. Some questions that I have for you all to think about as far as this timeline. And if you can specifically think in these questions, it might help to frame the conversation. The hope for the next few minutes is if we can take some time to place some specific milestones or events or occurrences in our meetings so that we know also the kind of work that might be needed in between. That's kind of the point of this conversation right now. So here are the questions for the timeline. Where should moments of community engagement or public input be placed? Where do we need to invite public dialogue, or by what point? And then the third question, what do you need from me as facilitator? or from this process to make an informed decision.
Tina,
Yes, sir.
will you be able to transmit an edited version of your questions later?
Yes.
Okay,
I can also have those in the chat box if that's helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Awesome, Nia. Thank you. Great. So they're already there. No worries. Yep, so those are it. 1, 2, and 3. So where should moments of community engagement be placed? Where do we need to invite public dialogue? And question 3, what do you need from me as a facilitator or from the process to make an informed decision? And then let's just do a round. I want to give everybody a couple of minutes to sit with. I'm going to time this for about 2 minutes here. The questions are in the chat box, and I shared those dates and the weeks that we're looking at. And if you want to just take a moment to maybe place how you might place things or what you feel like we need to have talked about, what you want to be educated on, even if you can't assign it as place in the timeline, that's okay. But just taking a minute here to see what are the things that we need to cover in our between now and the end of 12 weeks to make sure that we're at our place of informed decision and recommendation to the city and county. And keeping in mind that that date, we'll need to have that submitted between November 12th and the 19th. The November 19th presently is our last meeting as it stands. So really by the 19th is the recommendation date. Okay. So we're gonna just take a couple minutes here. I'll time us. I'll let you know when we're halfway. But if you can just take a moment to take some notes or jot some things down, and then we'll discuss. Thank you. And any questions in the chat box, I'll grab when we come back. Thank you, Elizabeth. So about another 45 seconds or so, just under a minute left. Okay. So you can just wrap up whatever thought you were on, knowing that some of it will just get shared verbally. So I'll go in opposite order this time. From the list on our agendas, going right to left. If you just want to kind of check your order, that's helpful so you're ready. But we'll start with Andrea this time, and then move to Dennis, and then Ben. And if you can just share, basically, when the mic comes to you, if you can just share if you answer the questions or if you place something at a certain day in the process in the timeline. It would be great to hear from everybody about what do you need from this process to make an informed decision, so that we can see what folks feel like they want to learn more about or the people they want to hear from. So at least that question. And I'll pass it over to you, Andrea.
Thank you, ma'am. Where should moments of community engagement be placed? Well, with my business, I never make a product that I didn't ask my customers about first. They totally buy into it at that point. They're excited about it. They're energetically aligned with it. And they're primed for it. So they're not surprised and raise a ruckus later. Oh, you didn't pick this color or whatever. So I am one to put inviting public dialogue first. However, I think in this situation, community engagement should come even before that. So we have our ducks in a row as a committee. So I would put the inviting community engagement at weeks 3, 4, and 5, September 17, 24, and October 1. I would put invite public dialogue right after that, weeks 6, 7, and 8, October 8th, 15th, and 22nd, because then you get essential information before the last 3 weeks, essentially 9, 10, and 11, when we're consolidating, processing, deliberating, and making a proposal, which the last meeting would probably be the presentation of such proposal.
Mm-hmm. Got it, thank you. And are there any specific needs you have about this process?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Dennis?
Well, Andrea actually changed my mind because I had dialogue before community engagement, but she persuaded me. I think I'm going to actually wholesale agree with Andrea as far as her timeline on getting the community engagement first, followed by that dialogue. The only thing that I would add that I'd like is, we already last week we got or 2 weeks ago rather, a good book to read by Catherine, and that's why I like to lie is to read about the history of not only Governor Vance, but just surrounding Pack Square and all those details of the time. That'd be helpful for me to be able to delve into the research and do that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Dennis. Ben?
Hey, I also think community engagement is really a big part of what we're doing here. But somewhere in there, I'd like to see or get a sense for what we individual members of the task force feel. I'm sure I'm trying to come with an open mind, but I think every single one of us has something in mind that they think should happen. And I think that would help us guide our community engagement. And I know that since I'm sure there are people that are watching this on YouTube that want to know what we're thinking now. So I don't know how to fit that in there, and maybe that fits into the category of what you could do for us as a facilitator, is help us form at least a if people have this is what I want to see happen, and I'm not going to change my mind. I'd like to know that, and if they're like, well, I want to hear more from this and that, I'd like to know that too. And I'll pass on from there.
Awesome, thank you. And I think I'll open it up after we hear from everybody to answer your question, Elizabeth. But if anybody that does go has an answer to that, the question is, will we have the opportunity to present our recommendation at city council and county commissioner meetings? If so, prior to the 19th, are we only providing a written report? So I think those are great clarifying questions. But again, if anybody in the committee has that or has the information, you can provide it.
Hi, this is DK. I'm happy to respond to that. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, the goal is to have the committee and the chairs present the recommendation to the board in person.
And the
so not just, go ahead.
Yep. So that question being, is it prior to the 19th? Can that be on the 19th or, yeah, I see Elizabeth.
By the 19th for sure, but I think we could talk about if there needs to be like a, preliminary update to the bodies and then a final one.
Okay. So it will be a written report and a presentation.
Yes.
Part of that. Awesome. Thank you, DK. So let's keep moving along. Next up, we have Elizabeth, followed by Catherine, and then Ms. Carmen.
Great, thank you. Like others, I think that community input really needs to happen early on. And I also think we need to be mindful that we're kind of asking for both input on the monument as well as soliciting ideas for people to honor, so kind of keeping both of those in mind. I would recommend that we have a draft of our recommendation report by October 29. That would be week 9 of 11. That would give us some time to circulate it amongst stakeholders, community elders, and those that are not on the committee to make sure we've captured everything. And then one thing maybe that you can help with is that I have some concerns about technology and that, all of the community engagement with the city and stuff thus far has relied heavily on video and email. And I want to be mindful that not everyone has the ability or access to those things. So making sure that we can capture voices in a way that's not solely dependent on technology. So that's what I've got.
Awesome, thank you. Catherine?
So I had the same schedule sort of written out as Andrea and Elizabeth combined. We're saying, starting about September 24th with community engagement and then having something prepared by October 29th. Essentially for all the reasons that Elizabeth stated, is just making sure that it can make the rounds throughout the rest of the community, make sure that we haven't missed something. And I also share that concern about how heavily we're relying on technology to do this community engagement work. I am from the western part of the county, a rural western part of the county, and many, many households out there have absolutely no high-speed internet access. Loading a YouTube video is a challenge, much less watching a live streamed YouTube video or being able to engage live through the internet. I'm on pretty darn high-speed internet now and still having some issues. So I just want to reiterate that and keep that in the forefront of people's minds. And then as far as something specific that I think you could help us with is it seems like a lot of times, and of course we don't have we have a definite time period, but it seems like committees can get really stuck in what I call this quicksand of ideas and feelings. And I think that it'll be really important to have you along to say, wow, y'all, we've talked about this for 15 minutes now. Let's reevaluate everything that just happened and try to make a path forward, pull us up out of the quicksand so that we don't get buried in there. And like Ben also, I'd like to hear where everyone's at right now. I think we can all run under the assumption that we want something to happen. But I'd really like to hear from each one of us because we're all different folks and we've got different perspectives and opinions. So.
Thank you, Catherine.
I agree with Ben. I absolutely would like to know how every task force member, where they stand on the issue we're going to be engaged in. I think community engagement, being a longtime organizer, community engagement is like way at the top of my list of, you know, what we should be doing first. I'm open to timelines that anybody else might list, but early on. And of course, access. As Catherine said, you know, in her rural area, in inner city Asheville, there are folks that don't have access. The access is really, really critical around this conversation. So that needs to be frontal brain pretty much all the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carmen. So the next up we'll have David, followed by Ms. Shirley, oh, excuse me, David King, followed by Lawrence, and then Ms. Shirley.
Okay, I agree with the idea that we should get all of the communications on the table, get the community engagement up front, because as soon as we can gather whatever information and input, we're going to go there. We need to start working on a concept and fleshing that out, because that's going to take, even once we come to a decision on, as a group, as what the concept might be, there's so many variations on how it could be. So I agree with that. And as far as a timeline, I would say I'm open to whatever, and I'll leave that up to the co-chairs and staff to decide what is the best order in which that should be done.
Thank you, David. Yeah. You're unmuted, but you might be frozen. There we go. Lawrence, you're up if you're ready.
Cortina, I think that my role is as an alternate is that I really don't have any input or anything unless somebody drops out and I get pointed. And when I answered earlier, because that was personal and not a part of any deliberations. So my understanding is I'm just on the sideline unless needed.
Okay. Understood. Thank you for coming in. Ms. Shirley, followed by Ms. Orange.
I think we need to, as a committee, find out how the committee's thinking before we start with the community engagement. Because if we don't, I agree with Ben and Carmen, and well, I feel like we need to know where the committee stands and we're together, because if we are fragmented, you're not going to get anywhere. And then after we find out where we're going and what we need to do to make whatever we decide happens, then I think we should have the community engagement no later than September 24th. And I think before we go to the committee, we need to be together, because if they see that, and then one concern that I have, I think it should be virtual, and maybe for those who don't have broadband, we can get it recorded, radio. The most people get radio in the places where they don't have internet, or because I don't think it's a good time, and I'm gonna be honest, near election time, and we're talking about the monument, to have a public meeting. I think right now is virtual for our safety. And I'm just being honest, what I'm feeling. And if it's some way that the people cannot get YouTube or figure out some way it can be recorded, that they can get the information, and then we get feedback from them, and then maybe be ready for a draft by the end of October the 29th or the 22nd. But I think virtual, you can include more people. Because of COVID, you can only have so many people in a building. And that's my thinking. But first of all, I think if we start communicating, know where each other's coming, and we can bond and build a relationship, we'll be able to make better progress than just meeting. Then we say public community engagement. That's my thinking.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ms. Shirley. And thank you for bringing in virtual being aspect of safety too. Ms. Orlean, and I'll read the comments before we go into the next round. Ms. Orlean, you're up. No, you're on mute. Ms. Orlean, you're muted. There you
Okay.
go. Mm-hmm.
I've been making notes, but now I'm trying to find one thing that hasn't already been said. I do want to agree with Shirley on some of the things that she was saying, that we do need to work together as a task force and really do all of our homework together before we start on the community engagement. And I would say that would probably be somewhere after September 24th. And what we would need from you, I feel, would be continuing the facilitation, and also if not from you, but somebody on the staff that works with you to research certain things for us, so that we are actually telling truths when we are in community dialogue.
Mm-hmm. Ma'am, thank you, Ms. Orlean. Were you done? I saw you.
Yes.
Okay, just checking. Thank you. And I didn't mention this in my introduction, but my work in time researching my own history and being a native of this area, I do have access to some resources already, but I'm always searching more. So I'm happy to support with that. And then maybe we also talk about what are the ways that we have a shared place for resources and research and all that goes. And I know there are some other folks on the call that have also been engaged in research in our community that I lean on their work, such as Deb Miles and other folks. Ms. Shirley has done historical work as well. So we have some resources in the group, it seems like, for that. Okay, so the last few people, it seems like we're getting some consent around the flow of things. So if we can hear from Savannah, then followed by Bernard, and then Deb Miles. And Antoinette, you'll close us out for this part.
Okay. I think that it's good for us to all know where we all stand, like in regards to what we think should happen to the monument. But I also think that ultimately it's not our own individual decision as a task force, but we're kind of a vehicle to amplify and guide what the community wants. And so I think it's really important that we don't just wait till we've already decided upon what we want to do to engage the community, because then it kind of feels kind of like, in my opinion, like kind of tokenizing, and not like their opinion really matters as much if they're not there throughout the whole process. And I think that it kind of ends up being like perpetuating white supremacy culture too, if you don't diffuse power in that way and like incorporate other people's voices. So I like Andrew's suggestion to have people coming like pretty much every week until the end of the process, so that way we're continuously engaging people. And then I also think that as we're engaging people, we should be sure to really target the people that are least represented with like monuments and historic areas in Asheville, to those that are like most represented already within the community. So that we're really trying to be inclusive and paint the whole picture. And that we use the time that we have to research and meet to help guide what the community wants based upon what we know from that additional information that we have and what we know is possible.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Savannah. And Bernard, you ready?
I'm ready. As a committee, I think we need to have a serious reflection on where we are, and that will help us identify the problem that we're facing. Once we identify, and that should be very early on, probably starting as soon as our next meeting with reflections. From reflections, that'll help us develop some concept of resolution, how we want to resolve it. If we identify we might be in total agreement on which way we're going early on, once we identify that, we can come up with a development of some type of resolution in which directions we want to go, which will lead us toward community engagement in that particular sequence. You identify the problem, how you want to resolve it, and then we go ahead, and that will then automatically include what the community is kind of sharing with us that they want the directions to go. And as early as the 22nd of October, we should have started formulating some type of draft of where we're going.
Got it. Thank you, Mr. Bernard. So next we have Deb Miles, and last but not least, Antoinette.
Thank you. I appreciate everything that folks have said, and I appreciate the great process, Cortina, of trying to find our way through this. I think one of the first things we need to do in this first week is to advertise the public platform. I know that I, along with a lot of y'all, probably have been getting emails and telephone calls from people telling me they want to explain where they're coming from and what we should do. And when I wrote Nia and Ashley about that, they said that it would be better if I would direct people to the public comment page so that we're all hearing the same thing. So I feel like we need some kind of a snippet that when we get an email from folks, we say, thank you for getting in touch with us. Your voice is very important. This is where you record your comments so that when we go to that part of the public comment, it's all in one place. Mm-hmm. I think we need a communication plan for newspapers, TV, radio, social media, so that folks know where they can come to hear, where that page is on the website that they could say things. And all of this public comment part, I think, needs to be in September and early October. So we're sort of under a timeline for this. I don't know if we need to take 2 or 3 or have longer meetings than 2 hours to take public comment, aside from the emails that we could get in some kind of long form. But I assume that's what we're talking about, is having people be able to call into this program and tell us how they feel. I think we need an extended list of resources, and that we need to be sharing that with the community. So it's not only we're educating ourselves, but the community is being educated. It concerns me when I see some of the letters to the editor of people not really understanding all the things that have happened on that space, and having what I call a white frame to understand that spot, rather than a frame that I think the African American community brings to us and the Indigenous community brings to us. So I would like that list of resources to reframe our understanding. I think people like Ibram Kendi's Stamped from the Beginning, so that we understand that this is not just something that happened in Nashville. This is a Southern phenomenon. And if we go back to the beginning of enslavement, it goes all the way up to the state of Maine and down to the state of Texas. So we need to understand that we're doing this in sequence with people all across the nation, and really all across the world. This is happening all across the world. Somehow we've got to come up with a process of finding out what the cost of removal or restructuring the monument would be, because that's part of our task. And I know that we're prohibited from talking to too much to each other about it. So I don't know if we assign that to a staff or one of us does it. I have been looking online, and there are lots of newspaper articles of what it's costing in other communities. And I don't know if that has anything to do with us or not, but at least it helps us see how other communities are processing it. I am really concerned about the safety issue, both for us and our families, as well as for the community. If we look at what's happened, what seems to be in some ways escalating, I really want us to speak civilly with each other and not be fearful, but be conscious of some of the consequences that could come from our work here. And I appreciate Ms. Shirley saying that we're in an election cycle, and I think voting day is November 2nd. Is that right? Third. So there's a part of me that would like to pay attention to that and get through some of the election process before we gather our public input. I don't know. I realize that gets us really close to the November 19th, but I wonder if we could make our report to the city and the county after Thanksgiving. So we finished our reporting the 19th, but we don't give our report, and that would give us 2 weeks after the election. And I think that's all I had to say. I appreciate what everybody had to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. Thank you for being thorough. Antoinette, I'll pass you the mic.
Okay, I will say there's literally nothing on my list that has not been said already. So what I'll do is highlight just a few things that others have already said. I definitely think it would be great to assess where we are as a task force now, with the understanding that each of us comes to the table with an open mind. And that does not necessarily mean that the way one thinks next meeting will be the way, we're thinking midway through. But it would be good to know where we're leaning. If by chance we're leaning towards, and I'm just making it up, I have no idea, a removal, it would be great to know early on the fiscal implications of that decision, because we might find ourselves in a position where the actual cost may change some minds, just thinking ahead. And I don't know, who would be the group to remove, what our options are. If it's going to be removal, do we want to make sure that it is being removed by people of color? One thing, and community input. I'm of the opinion that earlier is better, but I also think that we don't necessarily have to limit ourselves to one session. I think we could do some early, midway, and closer to the end of the process. I initially was thinking community input. I have around September 24th was the date that I was leaning towards. I really love the discussion regarding a communication plan, because I do believe that if the full correct history is told, that might go a long way in explaining why this process is even under way. And let's see what else. Oh, and another thing I would love to see, I would love to get information to see how other communities have engaged or grappled with this issue. What else is going on, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. And I'm really interested in that safety notion too, because I've gotten some comments in my instant message. before that. I would encourage folks to keep their safety in mind. And that's pretty much all I have to have. Oh, I think I had really by late October, early November, pretty much knowing where we are, where we stand, and then taking those last few weeks to pull everything together. That's what I have.
Awesome. Thank you, Antoinette. Thank you, everybody, for chiming in on that process. So I was taking notes along the way, as I'm sure we all were. I will, in our debrief and in between meeting, get with our co-chairs and see if we can present to you all a potential draft timeline, just because it does seem like time is of the essence. I do want to maybe transition us by proposing the focus of our meetings.
I think Miss Shirley had something to say.
I don't know if you heard the sawing in the background. Katina, I know you do a super job with your engagement in the community. Is it possible we could get notes or minutes from the sessions? You usually do a great job, and that way we'll all be receiving the same information. And I just want to say, the first meeting, we didn't get some of the things that we should have gotten. And as far as online and trying to read, if we could get a little email or something, check, we've added this so people can keep up with it. You know, like, for instance, the handbook, we didn't get that until we got online. If we could get our communication better, receive it, I would appreciate it. And I know you do a super job in doing that. Because some things came up today, and if I didn't know to go look online, I wouldn't have known it. And so they select the right facilitator. Thank you.
Yeah, you know, I consider you to be one of my mentors, so thank you for that. What I will say, because that also brings up a good question, I do want to clarify who will be the person to report back to the group. I know at this point in time, it had not been me because I wasn't selected when some of the earlier process started. But if there's a way for us just to have maybe one person from this group, I'm happy to have it be me. But I also want to check in with the co-chairs to make sure, like, if that had been something that y'all had discussed prior. But if it would be helpful for the group for there to be by a certain time after our meetings on Thursday to receive kind of a recap and any sort of notes or notification that things have been added to the public input site is what I'm hearing from Ms. Shirley. So does that feel okay for me to take on to the rest of the group? And I'm also looking at Ms. Orlean and Antoinette to see. Yeah, okay. So I'm happy to help facilitate communication within the group. And again, we'll have the agendas done and posted publicly by Tuesdays. Awesome, thank you, Mia. But we'll circle back to all of the threads of communication. I just want to call in a couple of comments, and then I'm going to move us to our community engagement section, recognizing that we do have a guest joining us that we'd love to hear from. Before we do that, I do want to circle back, and Lawrence, I know that you opted to not share, but there was some comments from Ben and Ms. Carmen and Elizabeth, as well as Catherine, all kind of concurring that your input is welcome. So, and you being here is important. Your input is valuable. So I just wanted to see if there's anything that you might have said that you wanted to say at this time before we move on.
No, basically, I really admire the audacity that we have in this effort to be very positive and very frank. And I think that Ms. Whitesides did an excellent job of raising the sensitivity, awareness of the divisiveness in politics, the time of the election, and the pressures that come with all of that. And I trust and pray that that will not be a factor in our deliberations. We opted to volunteer for this, and I think we all are prepared to do our very level best without fear of reprisal. That really concerns me. 13 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days as a Marine in Vietnam, I know a little bit about fear, but I can tell you we need to do the job and do it right based on all of the legacy and heritage of those who've gone before us. And I trust that this group will do the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. I'm going to go back through, make sure we didn't miss any other comments for the folks on the phone. Also, Andrea made a note or question to clarify. Community engagement includes review and manage community comments and questions in the Vance Monument Task Force at publicinput.com inbox, and also engaging Eastern and Western Band of Cherokee Indians, engage local Black historians, and inviting public dialogue is something different as a question. I think let's get that clarification. I know all of that would be included in a community engagement plan. To give a short answer, Andrea. And I know that we have actually someone here with us from the Eastern Band of Cherokee that I want to acknowledge in just a moment here. So yes, that is part of the community engagement plan, and that should be something that we put on our timeline. And just to circle back, I know Ms. Carmen Ramos Kennedy is no longer with us here, but did include her thoughts on community engagement and who we're missing. And I think that is it. And then I also see the comment here about having some resources from Andrea and some agreement from the group around private Google Sheet or Google Doc. I know Deb also brought that in your comments of maybe having a way that we have that educating the group and also publicly. So that will be something for us to think about in our communications plan. Yeah, and then I think also just naming that the election cycle being an important factor, but one that can be negated in helping each other by remaining above political fray is a comment that was added in by Dennis. So all good things for us to consider for our timeline. Before we, or actually maybe as part of the adjournment, I'm going to maybe ask the co-chairs to give their initial thoughts on our focus for next week's meeting. I'm also happy to share the notes that I was taking around what people had to say. So let's just go ahead and move into our community engagement session, and then we'll have some sense of what we'll talk about next week since the clock is ticking. So I do want to acknowledge and welcome Jeremy Wilson, Governmental Affairs Liaison for the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. And Jeremy, if you can hear me, or if it's easy for you, if you wanted to come off mute for a moment and just share your input with the task force here about community engagement, and if there are any folks that we might need to be making connections in relationship with.
Yes, thank you for having me. Yeah, this is it's always a unique situation where when we talk about community engagement in times like what we're facing now in 2020, this has been an ongoing issue for over 500 years for us. Since the inception of the Indian Removal Act of 1830, we've always been in the shadows of oppression. And so I was actually a tribal council member prior to becoming the chief's government liaison. And so community engagement was always a 24/7 issue for us on many different topics that happen here on the boundary. It's a unique situation in 2020 because like most things, emotion is always the go-getter that we resort to, and that's what we see a lot on dealing with politics. Is what we see a lot on in racial issues. The things that we try to steer our community away from is not leading with emotion, acknowledging the emotion, hearing the emotion, but leading with calm education and leadership. So the more that we take out from that emotion that's being described, such as when we talk about the monument or what's happening with Black Lives Matter, what's happening with indigenous rights, missing and murdered indigenous women, a lot of that stems from emotion. And so what we try to utilize that as for our people is understanding what their frustrations are. Are they trying to be heard? Or are they trying to be known? Being heard and being known are two different things, but they also go hand in hand as well. And our cultural identity has always been, from a Native American standpoint, our identity has always been mostly commercial. So talking with people here recently in political events and rallies who are not Native, we'll ask the question, do you guys wear headdresses? Do you guys live in teepees? I didn't know Cherokee existed. We thought you guys were extinct. And, we've been here since the very beginning. And I wrote a piece with West Virginia University about cultural identity. And, I get the comment a lot that because of the color of my skin, that I can't be Native American. And that, my skin color is a result of my father. My bloodline is a result of my mother, who is Cherokee and Navajo. My father is white. So, if I'm a council member and I go to an event and I try to, talk about Native Americans, the question I get is not about what I'm trying to educate and say. It's about, well, are you an Indian? You don't look Indian. And so, we face that a lot here because, we've been diminishing since the beginning of removal. I don't mean to get off in the weeds here, but talking about the matter of cultural identity, whether that's through African American identity, through Native American identity, or what have you, we share that oppression as well. So I guess, leading my conversation into this is what would be helpful for me is what exactly, on anyone's side on the other end of the call, is what exactly would you want to learn from a Native American standpoint in relation to what the issues are in the monument or the movement itself. Because I've been engaging with county commissioners within Jackson County and Swain County on these matters. And in Jackson County, which is unique for Cherokee in Western North Carolina, is that we originally, this was our lands in the very beginning, and that was taken away from us as a result of Andrew Jackson. And in Jackson County, that's primarily named after Andrew Jackson, which is the county that half of the tribe lives in. We have been in discussion with Jackson County about an idea that came from one of our journalists from the One Feather to rename it after former Principal Chief Walter Jackson. So it's not necessarily changing the name of Jackson County, but changing the name of what it's associated with Jackson. So that would be a very important piece for us, that we're not fully identified by tribal gaming, by our casinos, by colored feathers in the retail shops, or the assumption that we're, our council and chiefs, sit around a circle with a peace pipe, or we talk to animals. I mean, you hear some crazy things, and it's all primarily commercialized. And, so there's a lot of education that is needed out there. I think the unfortunate part about discussions like this is, and not that that it's a bad thing, but it always seems to surface at the point of a problem, and not that it surfaces because it's at the goodwill that it needs to be discussed. It always seems that, Black Lives Matter needs to become the topic because, it's an emotional state, or that it's, that riots have to come out, or that some problem has to happen or a disaster or catastrophe has to happen for us to get the point. And we never bring these topics up until a problem occurs. When everything is fine, then we completely forget about it. That's kind of what I see, in especially within 2020. I think 2020 has become, it's one of those things where it's a very dirty time, but like 2020 vision, it helps us see clearly what the problem is. And I think the problem is that, well, there are several problems, but I think the importance of our history and African American history is that oppression is real, and we do have an identity crisis. From an African American standpoint, there's all kinds of stereotypes you can associate them with. There's all kinds of stereotypes you can associate with us. We're not just drunk Indians who are greedy casino Indians. We have a rich cultural history as well, and it's not just commercial. I don't mean to get off topic or anything, but those are some things that we need to address. And when it comes to community engagement, those things matter, but also understand that when you have community engagement, you're going to have a plethora of opinions, and you're also going to have people of your ethnicity or of your color that are going to have the complete opposite of what you believe in, and that's got to be okay too. We have to understand that not everybody's going to be on the same side of the fence that we operate on, but we can't say that when we say the people, we can't wrap everybody in the same basket, because everybody has a different upbringing. They have a different environment they came from. They have different levels of education. They have different levels of scenarios that they can relate in or not relate in. So emotions are very high this year specifically. They're going to be high for a period of given time, but we can't fight emotions with emotions. We have to listen to emotions with understanding, and when we understand what the emotion is, we understand what the problem is, and when we understand what the problem is, that's when we educate with the solution. And that's something that I was able to be a part of when I was a council member, because I was responsible for community for about 2,000 people, collectively 16,000 people, and everybody had a different opinion about something. It still continues today. But I don't mean to ramble, but I hope what I said is informative and helpful.
Thank you so much for that wisdom. And yeah, I think that was what you shared was what was needed in this moment. And a question for you is, may we reach out to you beyond today around ways to come back to answer that question of what is it that we want to learn, and how to apply what you just shared. Can we continue to be in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you so much. And just in interest of time, I want to open it up for popcorn as opposed to us going around. Task force members, feel free to also use the chat box. I'm happy to say some things out loud for people on the phone. But it would just be great to just take a minute here and let's just name. You can just type it in the chat box, come off mute. Are there any other groups or individuals that are missing from community engagement? And let's just name who those individuals, groups, etc. might be, knowing that we're going to have some time to work on our actual community engagement plan. So we don't have to talk about the how right now, but just the who, if there's anything that wants to be addressed. And I will name from the onboarding packet a couple that aren't on our agenda, but just to also name the African American Heritage Commission, the Human Relations Commission of Asheville, Historic Resources Commission, the Public Arts Commission will all be in relationship in this process in some way. And then Ms. Carmen also added faith communities and African American social clubs to that list. No others to add right now? We can keep mulling that over. Okay. Oh, Preservation Society of Asheville and Buncombe County, got that, Ben. And also Deborah Miles, I see your comment here, which might have been addressed in the call from Jeremy just now. The historians from the Cherokee African American community see that. And then the option to advertise that as part of our Thursday meetings, publicize it widely. I hear that. Ms. Shirley?
Sororities and fraternities should be included.
I was just thinking to say the Divine Nine.
That'll do it.
That'll do
it. Got it. Okay. Feel free to keep adding in there in the chat box, and I'll read out things as needed. I do want to honor time and go ahead and see if we can hear from Richard White with an update. And then after Richard White, we'll have the adjournment and hopefully be able to share with y'all what we're focusing on for next week. And if not, we'll communicate that as soon as possible. Richard?
Cortina, good evening, everyone. I just wanted to give you an update. If you've driven by the monument as of late, you'll notice that the wrapping is off of the monument. That's because the weather actually caused the wrapping to deteriorate. And because it looks so poorly, the city decided to take the wrapping down. In talking to city council today, they decided to leave the wrapping down, but instead to leave the scaffolding in place and to leave the base covered, because it would cost approximately $7,000, we think, to rewrap the monument. And so rather than spend that additional money, they decided to leave it as it is now. So what you see now is what will be in place until you all reach a decision in terms of what will be the future of the monument. But I want to make you all aware of that decision in case anyone asks you about the appearance of it as it stands now.
Richard, would you be able and willing to just maybe write a couple sentences about how you just said that, and maybe we can add it to our language bank that Deb Miles proposed? If we do get emails, it might be easy to have something written up about why it's in that state.
Yes, I'll be happy to. Yes,
Okay.
I'll take care of that.
Thank you. And you can send it to me, and I'm happy to start that doc and send it out to the group. Okay. And then we'll pass it over to Antoinette for the adjournment.
Okay. Thank you. Ordinarily, I would ask for a motion to adjourn. I don't know if we need one today since there wasn't anything that we voted on. But after having heard from Jeremy, one thing that came to my mind was, I think, and piggybacking off of Deborah's discussion about an accurate historical context, perhaps from the next meeting, we could have someone speak about Vance in a historical context. And then I was also thinking, the person who also came to mind, Dan Waters, to give an African-American perspective from this region. And if, and I think that would be something to really delve into, regardless if it took the majority of the meeting time. I think if we know why we are here, I think that would go a long way. I don't have any other next steps. Cortina, what do you think?
Yeah, so that sounds great. I like that you brought that in about research. I'm curious if in sharing history, I wonder if it would be valuable and welcome if we had kind of a round table of sorts and invite a few historians or community members.
And I will also say, amongst our midst, Catherine, I think this is right in her wheelhouse. Correct me if I'm wrong, Catherine.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And I'm happy to reach out to some folks that I think would be well suited to that. And I'm also, even though I'm acting here as a private citizen, I'm our county archivist. So I'm very, very happy to help put together some resources, like Deborah was mentioning, trying to get together like a big Google Doc or something. We've been answering so many reference questions in regards to all of this lately that I pretty much have, a small ready-made, here's where you can find out about all sides of this particular issue. So if that's something that we are interested in, I'm more than happy to lead that charge.
I think that sounds great. Can we just do a thermometer from the group on that being the next step, and Catherine taking lead on that? And Catherine, will you let us know if you need support with that? But initiating it and getting that doc started will be great. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we got everybody, the majority and all on the group on board. And then the only other next step I was going to add, Antoinette, was also just establishing like a baseline template for our communication and engagement plan, and any sort of commonly asked questions that the group has been getting. Maybe we have language to go ahead and address that. I know Richard is working on the update to the monument. Deb also mentioned something that might be great for us just to have sort of maybe a language bank to be able to reply to people easily. But just how are we communicating along the way too? So that's all I captured.
Okay, and then one other thing in the chat, I'm seeing from Deborah, she would like to have someone speak to the ancient indigenous footpath that ran across what we now call Pack Square.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Great.
And if you don't have anything else, I'd just like to reiterate our next meeting is September 10th from 4:30 to 6:30. Once again, it will be held virtually. And other than that, I don't have anything else to add. We are just at our 6:30 time. And just to be safe, I would love to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and properly seconded. Do we need a individual vote on that?
This is Brad from the city. You do need an individual vote to adjourn.
Thank you. Let me pull up. Cortina, if you can help me, I don't have.
Gotcha. Do you want me to call folks by name?
Will you please?
Yes. Do I need to call alternates, Brad? No.
You do not.
Okay, thank you. Ben Scales,
Yes, adjourn.
Elizabeth Harper,
Aye.
Catherine Calhoun Cutshall.
It's Calhoun Cutshall, and yes, I'm happy to adjourn.
Thank you. David R. King.
Aye.
Lawrence Gilliam.
Aye.
Shirley Whitesides.
Aye.
Ms. Orlean Simmons.
Aye.
Savannah Gibson. Bernard Oliphant, and please correct me. Thank you. Deborah Miles. Okay, I saw you. I don't think you were vocal.
Aye.
Thank you. And Antoinette Mosley.
Aye.
Okay.
Hearing no nays, what is the date? September 3rd meeting of the Vance Monument Task Force is adjourned. Thank you.
Tina, can I have your phone number, please?
I will email y'all my contact information in my next email.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone have a good evening.
Thank you.